You see it in the creativity everywhere in the society. You see it in the language. You see the influences of all these cultures in the music because calypso was the music of the people. It's in the spiritual life and religious life of people.
This is the Moreish Podcast, where Caribbean history meets culture and cuisine.
Hi, this is Hema, host of the Moreish Podcast. This is part 2 of our look at the history and culture of Trinidad. If you haven't listened to part 1, I encourage you to go back and have a listen. It is packed with information, not only about the history of Trinidad, but sprinkled throughout you'll hear bits of history and information about other Caribbean countries. Then come back in 2 weeks, where we'll be diving into the history of Tobago with Devon Adana.
With all of these different people that made their way, lived, were brought, were kidnapped, were enslaved on the island, how does the influence show up in what the culture is today and the food is today?
One of the things, to me, the biggest expression of it is the creativity of the people. Trinidadians are not, they're not factory produced. They love to be allowed to do their own thing. And this is why, to a great extent, we have to design an economy for creatives, not for public servants. Because a lot of people, even if they have a job in the public service, they're doing something else after hours, something that is their passion, their love. They're making a mass, they're acting, they're singing, something else, but the economy is not shaped for them. The economy comes from the plantation economy. And so we do have serious economic problems because of that, the kind of economy that was created by the Europeans here. And we moved from sugar, which was a monoculture. Then we went to cocoa when sugar failed. So we had our short period of cocoa barons. And the most prominent expression of that are the Magnificent Seven, the houses around the Queen's Park Savannah where people, you're going to see these things like castles. One of them is what used to be called a Stallmeyer Castle. It's now been acquired by the state and it has been changed back to its original name of Killarney, I think, because it was copied from Scotland, I think. And so some people made a lot of money from cocoa, and then we got a blight that went through the witch's broom, which is destroyed the cocoa and pauperized a lot of people. And then after that, oil. So we've only had always one product to earn foreign exchange and wealth. And today, as we engage energy transition, or as you know, the American government opens the floodgates on oil to make the price come down, we're going to feel the effects of that. And not only that, we have brought up as much oil as we can. The oil production of oil is in decline, but we have not. The impact of that history is that we have a very limited economic options because the plantation economy has survived, which is you put all your eggs in one basket and you live off of the fat of that one thing. And when that collapses, you have nothing else. And you have to scramble and you just hope that, people just say, the fact that they survive, somehow they survive. Some people don't. They say, well, Trinidad is, God is a Trini. That's to explain the fact that they recover. So God is a Trini. We live with that motto. The point I was making, you see it in the creativity everywhere in the society. You see it in the language. You see the influences of all these cultures in the music because calypso was the music of the people. Then we got to soca. Soca is the birth, and the person who created is attributed to having created it, Lord Shorty. He has described very publicly how he fused the rhythm of the Indian music. He was from South, and therefore, when you're from South and you have a lot of, the South is a lot of in East Indians, and so their music is right next door all the time. He was influenced by that, and he deliberately fused the music, and he called it soca. right? Soul of Calypso, he called it, soca. Now we have the Indians brought their music of the people was chutney, which is a different kind of chutney to what you hear now, but very much the music for when you have a baby, the rituals associated with, a baby is born, with a wedding that's going to happen. Now that has evolved to soca chutney. Everybody is into soca chutney. It's in the spiritual life and religious life of people. You can go to a Catholic church, you see a lot of Indians. You go to Waterloo, to the Monday there, you see Africans and so on. People, so it's the cultural fusion and the food, like the whole of Trinidad will get up again, as they did recently with the Jamaican singer, Beanie Man. I think it's Beanie Man who made some disparaging, what they considered a disparaging comment about doubles. The whole of Trinidad, all over the world, came up, attacked the poor man. They had to put a big apology on and say, he loves Trinidad, he loves everything Trinidad. The poor man, I feel sorry for him. But the national food doubles pilau, which is a mixture of what the Africans might cook at home, maybe with some European influence. Then you would roti. They say, well, roti is Trinidadian, not really Indian. I mean, India has roti, but not the kind that we and the way we want it. It's a totally different experience. So the food is roast breadfruit and smokerin and saltfish and all these things. Kuku, which is African, and the food of the what we would call the underclass, the enslaved people who did not get the meat. They had to look after the animals, but when all of that meat went to their master, and they got the tail, the feet, and so on. So cow heel soup, because that's what you had. You flavor your soup with that. Pigtail, oxtail, and all these things come out of the poverty. But today, they are gastronomic delights that we can offer the world. So yeah, in the food for sure, the music, the dance, we dance like they say if you go to a fete and you see somebody entering with a finger up in the air, that's a trini. That's how we land in a fete. That's a trini. People do other kind of we put up our finger in the air, pointing to the sky. But at the same time, you will hear people talking about race issues, the contestation, because the politics is organized. The two main parties have ethnic bases, but we have a calypsonian named David Rudder, and he has a line in one of his songs: "Is how we vote is not how we party." Politicians have mastered the art of organizing people by ethnic tribe for the just as an arithmetical formula for votes, and people fall into that because in some cases they will say there really is nothing that differentiates one party from the other, and people have driven wedges over the years. In our history, there was a time when before independence, when Indians, from that historical fear that was instituted by the British policy of divide and rule, they were afraid that independence is going to mean that the blacks are going to take over and we have to be in fear. And they wanted to partition Trinidad. One party proposed a partitioning of Trinidad, this little island, because they were following what was going on in India and Pakistan when India was partitioned to create Pakistan because of Hindu Muslim animosity. They tried to transplant that here. Fortunately, wasn't taken on. Not even Indians. Majority of Indians did not support that either. But these are, to a great extent, manufactured animosities because you look at Trinidadians, they understand, they know each other, they celebrate each other. On Diwali Day, when Hindus are having you should check the roti shops. Everybody participates in Diwali by making sure they eat roti on that day. And similarly, this is the Hindus here. They're fully into some people may not eat beef, but many do, and they're Hindus. And for Christmas, they have their ham and they have their whatever because this is what you do at Christmas. So there is a mainstream culture, there is a special culture, there's a unique culture of one's own. And to the extent that people can celebrate what is unique to them and celebrate it with everybody else is what makes Trinidad so special.
As I've been doing this work and researching and learning more about the different countries in the Caribbean, Trinidad is so unique in all of the things that you're just talking about. And we didn't dive into the food, and food is such a big part
Hmm.
of there's so much history that comes with the food, but it's a big part of the culture. Like, listen, when I used to
Yeah.
go there to Trinidad every year as a kid, you had to eat at every person's house that you went to.
You, you have to, yeah. Because if you don't, people would feel insulted, especially if they're prepared for you. But all of us have some idea of what do we consider our comfort food. And it's, I mean, it's a food of childhood always, you know. And, you know, I would just think, if I could sit down with a plate of rice, dal, and bhaji, I'd eat with my hand with a little kuchila on the side. That would just be, just, yeah, that's home. It's a taste of home, right? And you might have your own, but mine would be that, you know.
I've said this several times, but pilau is the thing that I could eat every single day.
Exactly. And somebody's going to tell you, no, don't eat pilau every day because rice has so many calories and so on. But it's your food. It's what opens up spaces in you and make you feel so warm inside. You feel satiated after you eat that. You feel satisfied. You might feel overfed, but it lasts for seconds.
It is a taste of home. There's so much that we've just really hit the surface of the history. And I'm going to leave some links below for people to dive more into the history of specifics if they're interested. But before we wrap up, I do want to go back to the Lloyd Best Institute because you guys are doing
Mm.
some interesting work.
The line that best captures it comes from a seminal piece of work that Lloyd did, which is independent thought and Caribbean freedom. And it captures a perspective on the Caribbean that to use words from Bob Marley, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. That's what independent thought is. Because the colonization process has been so thorough, so scientific, because it comes through a value system that has been put in that this is what you aspire to, and it is embedded in the education system. That that the more educated you are, is the more colonized you can actually become. That's why Pan was created by people who largely out of school, teenagers really, who lived in Laventil, Morva, Sealots, and so on, Beetham. And we may have been freed from enslavement. Indentureship has ended. We became politically independent, but the imagination is colonized, and you see it in our inability to solve problems that require common sense in the region. So, it is the institute promotes independent thought. So it is totally non-partisan. Anybody can come there. I can speak to if people want to speak to me. Doesn't matter what political party you belong to, what gender you are, what income group you have, where you live, none of that matters. It's a space that is we fiercely protect as independent. And it starts here, and that the path to freedom from the legacy of colonialism is through that. When we can see the place as it is, not with a whole set of assumptions that are really baked into colonialism that we've imbibed, but as it is, and see each other as they are, and understand the place and the people enough to figure out how do we develop this place in a direction that works for everybody. So equity, justice, all these values are embedded at the institute, and this is happening in an environment where power systems are always trying to divide and to give primacy of one thing over the other. It can be a hostile environment, hostile in the sense that the mainstream may be moving against we may be swimming against the tide sometimes in on independence and not going with whatever. Sometimes the majority is going a direction. You say, no, we're not going there, right? You see in the States what's happening. It is the majority that brought that government to office, right? That's what democracy is. You just have to go with that. If that is the one, but we understand how you can even manipulate people. People are manipulated. People allow themselves to be manipulated. All of those things are at play. But the Lloyd Best Institute, so what we do, we are space for independent thought. We have gatherings we are about to host from the 16th of March to the 22nd, something that we call our annual convoy. Convoy is a gathering of people. Um, Goes back to the when the Africans would have to go underground and strategize. They used to hold their convoy using a French word. Our focus this year is on transformation of the education system. And we take as our point of departure a proposal that Lloyd, the founder and my husband, Lloyd Best, had put out for public discussion many years ago called School in Pan, not Pan in School. School in Pan. And what he did is he observed the genius with which young people who were out of school were dropouts in many cases, perform badly in school. First of all, the genius that they brought to inventing pan and moving it from a dustbin cover to the kind of music you can put on any world stage today, a music of joy and of beauty, a thing of real joy and beauty. And how up to today, young people who are failing in the education system, the academic education system, they go to a panyard. They're highly disciplined in the panyard and they're getting thrown out of school because they are not disciplined, for indiscipline. They're disciplined in the panyard. Their capacity to learn is enormous to create, and it's a space where they come alive. And he's kind of tapped into that to say, how can we take that, understand that, and put it into the education system so that our young people are filled with the joy of learning that they have in the panyard, the discipline that comes from taming all your impulses, with the need to and the willingness to respect authority, because in the panyard you respect authority. This is the captain and he's drilling you, and you're learning that, the ability to connect with elders as these are repositories of knowledge, and I will respect that. The elders are always there in the panyard. So Lloyd developed this conceptual paper about how to change, how to decolonize the education system by drawing on insights from pan. And so we were going to be promoting it shortly, and we will invite anybody who wants to attend and see some of what we will probably put online. So we tackle those kinds of issues and operate on, I think it's radical thought. It's about the kind of revolution that the society needs. It's not armed revolution. It's a revolution of the mind, of the intellect, and how to change and build a development process that is fair, equitable, where everybody has a space around the table and does not enrich a few at the expense of the many. And gives us all, more than anything else, it gives us all that sense of belonging here, which is what you need to build a nation, to know what it really means to be Caribbean. I am Caribbean.
And Lloyd Best, your late husband, is no longer with us, but his legacy lives on. His work
Yes,
lives on.
it's yeah. He used to say, because he was someone who swam against the tide all the time in his life. He would be very unpopular because what he always had the courage to stand by his conviction. He never swam in the tide he was always suspicious of popular movements because of that, really, because he often would say, you have to understand, and don't support me, and don't say you want to be in this if you don't understand it. You have to know. I want you to understand what it is, and you have to know it. You can't just like me, because a lot of people want to follow Lloyd, they love Lloyd, but he didn't want followers. He wanted partners. He wanted, and his thing would be, I speak my mind. All you have to do is speak your mind and not be intimidated and shut down and become subversive. Let's talk and see if we could agree on a few things, and we move on from there. And so he swam against the tide, almost like a lone voice, until much later in his life, where people came to really revere him, and he's constantly referred to here in Trinidad. People always, letters to the editor, people quoting him, all kinds of things. And he used to say that he was just doing his work, and if his work was of any value, it will continue, and if it was of no value, it'll be forgotten. Well, I think it's history has proven him right. His work is of value, and Very important work that what we continue, not just us, other people are doing, drawing on it, just in the name of development of the region and its people.
I'm going to leave a link to the Institute in the show notes for people to dig more into some of the work that's happening coming up and learn a little bit more if they're so inclined.
Yes, Kamel is deep in the archiving of all our publications and so on. So the archives give you a really good, a lot of Lloyd's writings are there in the Trinidad and Tobago Review. You can search them. He's written on everything, on carnival, on agriculture, on the economy, on the people, on Tunapuna, all kinds of things. And other people, other thinkers. For many, many years, we published a monthly magazine, as it were, a newspaper, really, which was a place for thoughtful reflection and review of the Caribbean.
Auntie Sunity, it has been a pleasure to have you join me today and share. This is just a little bit of the knowledge and a little bit of the history. There's so much more to Trinidad, to Tobago, to the region of the Caribbean.
So much more. We're not just a place of sunset and sand. That's a myth, We have real people here, real thinking people live here.
We say on the podcast, it's not, the Caribbean is not just jerk chicken, carnival, and beaches.
Yeah.
There's so much more.
Yeah, those are the entry points. But if you dig below, well, that's why people come here and never want to leave.
It has been a pleasure to have you on. I appreciate it. I will leave links down in the show notes if anybody's interested in diving a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and it has been my pleasure, Hema. And I wish you all the best with Moreish. I hope people understand what Moreish means.
Why don't you tell people what Moreish means?
It's just when something is so good, you just want more. It's we just invent that word as this. We want more of this. Whatever this is, we want more.
Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the Moreish Podcast. I'm curious, did you already know what Moreish means, or is this your first time hearing it? I've got lots more coming up. Next week, we have folk tales, and then in 2 weeks, Devon Adana will be here to talk about the history of Tobago. See you then.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Moreish Podcast. Connect with us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the Moreish Podcast. See you for the next episode.